This is Ganesha. He's one of the most popular of the Hindu gods. And you see that he has an elephant head. And you're probably wondering how that come about, you know. Well, the story is that his mother was married to Shiva, who was the principal Hindu god. But he was away all the time, and she got very lonely. So she decided she would create a child to keep her company. And because she's a goddess and can do all kinds of wonderful things, she took some mud and clay and patted it together into the shape of a little boy. And she breathed life into him. She was quite pleased with him. But she'd gotten quite dirty in the process with all this mud. So she said, why don't you watch the door while I go in and clean up a little bit? Just don't let anybody in. He says, okay, Mom. So, or words to that effect. And along came Shiva, unexpectedly home early. So he started to go in, but he did not know who he was, and decided his job was to keep this stranger out. So he said, you can't go in. And Shiva was furious because he said, in my own house that I can't go in. So he struck off the head of this little boy and then rode down the street. And then, meanwhile, his mother heard all this commotion going on. So she came out to see what was going on. And she saw that Shiva had struck off and killed her little boy. She was very upset, begged him to put the head back on, and he would not because he was still not used to ever being, not getting his way. And so he refused. And so she begged and cried. Finally, he agreed. He said, well, all right, I'll do it if I put the head of the first living creature I see. So it happened to be an elephant. So he cut off the elephant's head, put it on the little boy, and breathed life into it again. And so his mother was delighted, you know. So, and Shiva was still a little bit resentful, but he had done the good thing by his wife, so he was happy about it. And the reason he's got he's got a part of a tusk, you see here, this little bit. It was said that he was also the patron saint of literature and writing. And so he went to a cafe one night with his friends and was having a great time listening to someone recite a poem. But then he decided to make a copy of it, but he didn't have a pen handy. So he broke off the tip of his tusk, used it as a pen, and started copying this poem down, which is why he has that. And he's often shown with food and drink in his hands because he was so convivial a person. And another story about him was, this snake around him. One night after one of these nights out with the boys, he was walking home, and it was a very dark night, except that there was a moon shining. It was the only light around. And he tripped and fell because he'd eaten so much. And his stomach split wide open, so food started pouring out. And he tried desperately to tie himself together, but the only thing around that could be used as a belt was a snake on the road. And so he used a snake, tied it around, which is why you see him tied it around here, just to keep his stomach together until he got home. So that's the reason for it. But anyway, because of all these stories about him, and because he's such a convivial person, kids love him. He's one of the favorite of the Hindu gods, and you can see why.
Is this one of the first pieces that you usually start off with?
Yes.
Okay, and why is that?
It is the one who got me my job.
Okay.
It was 1968, and I was a trainee at the Young Museum, but they kind of like switched me over to the Brundage Collection. That's what the agent was called in those days. And that was when Mr. Brundage was seriously buying objects. And what he would do was to send a whole bunch of photographs to Yvonne Darchancet, the director, and he would do research and tell him what he wanted. And since I was the first person who really knew something about Indian art working in the museum, so he gave me the photograph of Ganesh and said, write something about it. So luckily, we had a very good library, so I went into some research, gave him 2 pages, and Mr. Brundage purchased the piece.
Ah.
And maybe because of that, then at the end of summer, the job was offered to me. So I think it's all Ganesha's doing.
Do you recall what you wrote about Ganesh at that time?
I talk about a little history, how Ganesh came about, and also Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. All people pray to him before they do anything. students pray to him before an examination. In fact, when they wake up in the morning, the first thing they do is pray to Ganesha first to remove all the obstacles of the day. So Ganesha is very important. Then I talk about where it came from, because as you see, there are many Ganeshas around me, and from the rock, you can tell which part of India it's from. Now this one, my senior curator, Clarence Shangwa, used to tease me by calling him Cupcake, because of all the icing all over the piece. That's because the stone is very soft. It's a chloritic schist from South India. And it's very soft when you first quarry it, so you can do a lot of detailed work, but then it hardens later on in the air. So you don't see such, fancy Ganeshas anywhere else. And I like him because he has personality.
Can you tell about the provenance of this? You said that you made a recommendation that Mr. Brundage purchased the piece. Where did it come from? And
I would guess that it came from Hoysala, which is a large area, but you cannot pinpoint the temple. You don't want to anyway. But it's from Halabit in the Hoysala.
And I notice here there's a sign that says donations to Ganesha may be placed in the slot. Is this statue particularly relevant as far as paying alms to?
It is the most popular statue in the museum when I was working there. And I would walk up to the gallery, and you see dimes and pennies and quarters stuck all over him, as well as chocolate.
Oh, really?
So I would eat the donation. So finally, we had to put a donation box in front of him because it was getting too much. And we don't want people harming the stone.